Some of the most painful relationships in life are the ones that were never actually relationships at all. Have you ever spent months or even years believing someone cared deeply about you, only to realize later that the connection you believed in might have existed mostly in your mind? For many people who grew up with emotional neglect, relationships can feel like emotional puzzles. One moment you feel deeply connected to someone, and the next moment it feels like the ground disappears beneath your feet. And sometimes the most confusing relationships are not romantic ones. They're the almost relationships, the friendships that feel intimate, intense, and meaningful, yet never quite become what your heart hoped for. Today, I want to talk about a pattern that happens more often than people realize. It's when someone gives you just enough emotional attention to keep you hopeful, but never enough to create a real relationship. Think of it like squeezing a lemon. Before you cut a lemon, you roll it under your palm on the counter, pressing it, softening it, breaking the inner cells, so that when you finally cut it open, the juice pours out easily. In a strange way, some people do this emotionally to others. They create intense closeness. They flirt with romantic energy. They send mixed signals. They give affection, attention, and warmth. But they never fully commit. And if you grew up feeling unseen or emotionally unsupported, that dynamic can feel incredibly powerful because it awakens feelings you've been starving for: the excitement, the hope, the possibility that someone finally understands you. But here's the painful twist. Sometimes that connection isn't love at all. Sometimes it's manipulation, or at least a dynamic where one person enjoys the emotional attention without intending to give the same level of care in return. For someone with unresolved childhood wounds, this situation can feel like the most intense romantic experience they've ever had. Not because the relationship is healthy, but because the longing becomes stronger than the connection itself. Instead of two people moving toward each other naturally, the emotional energy builds in the space between them. You feel their presence, you sense something deeper, but it never fully arrives, and that tension can become addictive. People who experienced emotional neglect as children often develop a strange skill. They become experts at pretending their feelings don't exist. Imagine liking someone deeply, feeling hopeful about them, and yet telling everyone, even yourself, that nothing is happening. You might say things like, "Oh no, we're just friends. It's not like that. I'm not actually interested in them." But internally, your mind keeps replaying every moment, every look, every conversation. Because when you've grown up craving emotional validation, even a small amount of affection can feel incredibly meaningful. That's why confusing friendships can last for years. One person keeps giving small pieces of attention, little emotional breadcrumbs, and the other person keeps hoping those breadcrumbs will eventually lead somewhere real. But over time, something painful begins to happen. Your dignity slowly drains away. You start hiding your feelings, you start lying about how much it matters, and eventually you may not even recognize yourself in the situation anymore. Because deep down, you know something isn't right, but you don't want to admit it. That brings me to a story I received recently from someone I'll call Rebecca. Rebecca told me about a connection that lasted nearly 3 years, but it wasn't exactly a relationship. It was what she described as a confusing friendship. She met this friend through an app. From the beginning, the connection felt effortless. They talked easily, they spent a lot of time together, and Rebecca noticed something interesting. When she was around this friend, she liked who she became. She felt more open, more relaxed, more alive. For nearly a year, everything felt simple, but slowly, something began to change. The friendship started shifting into something harder to define. Long hugs that lasted a little too long, moments of physical closeness that felt intimate, playful jokes about what it would be like if they were a couple, even conversations about future homes and shared lives, said half seriously, half playfully. At first, Rebecca believed those moments meant something deeper. She thought their connection was quietly growing into love. But there was one problem. They never talked about it directly. Everything existed in a strange, emotional gray area. And that gray area slowly took over Rebecca's thoughts. She began analyzing everything, every look, every small gesture. Was that lingering glance meaningful? Did that hug mean something more? Why did her friend seem uncomfortable when Rebecca mentioned dating someone else? It started feeling like they were both circling around the same unspoken truth, like two people dancing around a relationship neither one wanted to admit. But sometimes what feels like destiny is something very different. Eventually, Rebecca couldn't keep guessing anymore. 3 years of emotional ambiguity had left her exhausted. So one day, she asked a simple question. "Have you ever thought about us dating?" Her friend paused, and then she said something Rebecca wasn't prepared to hear. She said she had never seen Rebecca romantically, not once. In that moment, Rebecca felt something collapse inside her. Not just hope, but 3 years of memories, 3 years of possibilities, 3 years of believing something special was quietly growing between them. Suddenly, she wondered, had those moments meant something only to her? But the story didn't end there, because a week later, her friend returned with a new question. She asked, "Would you be okay if I took some time to think about whether I might have feelings for you?" Just like that, rejection turned back into possibility. Hope returned, confusion returned, and the emotional cycle began again. Rebecca's mind became trapped in constant analysis, replaying memories, searching for hidden meaning, wondering if she had imagined everything. Psychologists sometimes describe this experience as limerence, a state where your mind becomes intensely focused on another person, fueled by uncertainty and longing. Unlike healthy love, which grows through clarity and mutual commitment, limerence thrives in ambiguity. The less certain the relationship is, the stronger the emotional obsession can become. Eventually, Rebecca reached a turning point. She moved to another city, and that physical distance created something emotional confusion never allowed before: space. For the first time in years, she could step back and see the situation more clearly. She noticed how much emotional energy she had invested, how much time she had spent analyzing someone who never clearly chose her. So she made a difficult decision. She ended the friendship, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Because real love doesn't live in confusion. Real love moves toward clarity. It doesn't rely on hidden signals or emotional guessing games. It grows through honesty and mutual commitment. And perhaps the most important lesson Rebecca learned was this: the people we become most attached to are not always the ones who love us best. Sometimes they are simply the ones who unknowingly awaken our oldest emotional wounds. But once you recognize that pattern, something powerful becomes possible. You stop chasing people who keep you in uncertainty. You stop mistaking attention for love, and you begin preparing yourself for the kind of connection that is actually capable of lasting. Because real love isn't something you chase endlessly. It's something you become ready to receive. And when that readiness meets the right person, love no longer feels like a confusing puzzle. It feels like coming home.